socialism. And I said, well, that's what we need. We all need that. That's what true socialism is about. Anyway, so I've been researching all this for years, and I discovered that the very first use of the word communism was actually in Poland. In 16th century Polish, communism was used to describe a religious perspective in the Unitarian movement of Polish Christianity. So these people believed in universal redemption for all. God has not created a world in which some people go to heaven and then other people go to hell forever. These Unitarian communists said, no, God isn't that stupid and mean. That's a mean idea of God. God wants everyone to succeed in the end and find nirvana, find heaven, and build heaven on earth. And they were called communists, meaning we want a communal, collective liberation for humanity. Now that's interesting. Adam Zamoyski, Polish historian, uncovered this. Now this is not explored. You know, when communism was imposed by Stalin on Eastern Europe, my view is he suppressed the actual meanings of communism and socialism. And the authentic fire of true spiritual communism was therefore, attempted to be snuffed out. And in fact, Stalin did kill a lot of the communists in Russia, in the purges, and in Eastern Europe. So there is a university in Germany now researching all this, and they're doing PhDs in spiritual communism. I've been bashing on about this for the last 20 years, but what I'm saying is let's do this together. Let's just rediscover these roots. And if you look at, for instance, in left Hegelian thought, Moses Hess, who introduced Marx and Engels to each other, he was a left-wing thinker who used the term communist to mean when mankind reaches spiritual enlightenment collectively. There'll be no poverty, there'll be no war, there'll be no mass rape, all the stuff we're seeing going on in the world. There'll be no ethnic violence, religious violence. We'll have reached a plane of being where the Geist, the spirit, will be realised in all of us and we'll be able to live in peace. That's what Moses Hess meant.
Nirvana.
Well, not exactly, because nirvana is sort of a nothingness place where you vanish into it. What these spiritual communists wanted was a society of an enlightened kind, where equality, peace, gender equality, and so on. And he wrote a huge study called The Holy History of Mankind. Again, these are the lost classics of spiritual communism. And this project, therefore, is about recovering them from the archives. They're hidden away in libraries. I'd like to see them brought out so that humanity has choices we can make. I personally don't agree with extreme Zionism, extreme nationalism. I don't agree with extreme enforcement-style North Korean-type communism. I think if more people knew about spiritual communism as an option, it might make sense. So that's the project anyway, and the language. And yeah, all the details are in. It's one of the 99 names of peace. And the Romanian word for peace, by the way, is given in the book. Word is cuvant, wisdom, intellectuinia, Romanian. You can see the word intellect is hidden in there. And the word for peace itself is similar to the Latin, pace. But I give all the words for peace in Romanian here. Sacred is sacru. Bless. Okay, there we are, one of the 99 names of peace. Okay, any questions? I assume you've thought about these matters before?
Yeah. One have always thought about things. I was in Romania in the 70s, in Constanza. and I was also in Poland in '76 for some time,
Oh, right.
building ships there.
Mm.
I found the communism that was in force in those days to be rather horrible towards their own people.
Sort of secret society run by
Secret
spies.
society, the land of milk and honey, sort of. If you listen to their leaders, but you couldn't escape the country even if you wanted. You'd be shot on the border, or taken into custody for God knows what life. So everybody was scared to talk to us, scared to socialize with us even. So
You were a Norwegian coming in to help
yeah,
shipbuilding, technically,
yeah.
and they were
It
afraid.
was more okay in Poland. They were at the. It was the time when Lech Walesa was working in the shipyards.
Right.
Before he came to more Poland than he was.
Did you meet him? Was he
No,
there?
I did not meet him.
No.
But it was sort of more relaxed. But in Romania, it was
Stricter.
very very dark and very strict. Yeah.
Yes.
The Polish people, they hated the Russians.
I think historically there's been a bit of a
Yeah, because
border there all along.
yeah, based on the fact that all the farming, they had all sorts of fantastic farms there. They had a lot of produce, except it all went to Russia. They had the first choice on all the produce from the.
So economically they were under Russia's control, in
Yeah.
fact.
Yeah, from the
And they
Warsaw
resented
Pact.
that.
Yeah. So I stayed in a hotel called Reda in Stettin. They had a fantastic restaurant with a beautiful menu, many pages, and we tried to go through it. So we ended up with pork chops every night.
Because what was on the menu wasn't available.
No, exactly. Everything was gone. Now it's going to Rochelles. Pork chops. So that was what we got, unfortunately.
Well, that goes back to my point about
Didn't work.
the error of Stalinism was to enforce communism instead of allowing it to arise naturally. And it's a tragedy because the Russian and Polish people are actually very similar Slavic types.
Yeah.
Their languages are not entirely different. And there's no reason why they couldn't be best friends. I mean, I've been to Poland, I've spoken in Warsaw, I've been to Moscow. I've met intellectuals in both Russia and Poland who are the cream of the cream, you know. I wish they'd all get on.
So do I.
There's a tradition in Polish philosophy, by the way, called universalism. Interesting that it's in the universalist Unitarian circles that communism was coined. There was when I went to Warsaw and was meeting philosophers, they were interested in this thing, universalism. What is that? What is the truth that is universal to everyone and everything? Those are very important questions that we should still ask, I think. Okay, talking of which, why don't we do our periodic table then and choose a couple and see what they can shed on this. So have you got one?
I'm not sure we had this recently, but I thought about 60.
Number 60.
Author of Judaism.
Ooh. We haven't had that for a while, I don't think.
No.
So that's a good one. Let's do that one. And Armel.
Esoteric Transpersonal 126b.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's good too. Right. Well, let's do the Orthodox Judaism, number 60 first. When I lived in London, I was teaching at the University of London, philosophy and religious studies. I was doing my PhD. I was setting up the Peace Studies Institute, and I was Secretary General of a thing called the World Conference on Religion and Peace. And so through that, I met many of the leading peace thinkers from different religions, and I met several rabbis who became good friends of mine, particularly Rabbi Albert Friedlander, who was president of Westminster Synagogue. And I also went to Jews College, which is in Finchley, North London. which is where you train rabbis, Orthodox rabbis. And I spent many happy days in the library, thinking, well, shall I train as a rabbi? What would I have to do, right? Basically, you have to master the Talmud, which is like vast number of volumes. Obviously, you have to master the Tanakh, the books of what we call the Old Testament. And they divide them into, their own unique lists. I have a Jewish Bible next door, and also a Hebrew one. But the Talmud is what you have to master, which is all the commentaries on the text of the Old Testament. And these are written down very long time ago by different rabbis who were disputing what the texts mean. So they had their own little schools and their own traditions, and it's actually a really fascinating series of volumes which are hugely complicated. And so they deal with general principles of law. To be a rabbi, you have a synagogue, which is a Greek word meaning the place where everyone comes together, sin together, agog, to lead. So the place where everyone comes together every Saturday for a service. There's readings from the scripture, the Torah, and then there's normally a little sermon by the chief rabbi, and there's some hymns depending on which tradition you're in. And it's a very ancient tradition. Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, goes right back through the patriarchs, through the prophets, to Moses, who latest historical research puts him about 1500 BC, trained in Egypt, in the wisdom of Egypt, but part Hebrew at least, who then identified with the Hebrews as the underdogs, the underclass, the slave people, and became a leader. It's a bit like, say, Che Guevara, who trained as a medical doctor, could have had an elite job in his culture, but instead he chose to become a communist and fight with the poor and the underdogs. Moses did the same. Had various spiritual experiences which are written up in the text. And I think I would regard Moses as a historical figure. I mean, there are people say, no, he didn't exist, it's all fiction. I don't believe that. I think he's a real guy, but I do think that it was embellished and amplified, because the text that we have, the Torah, was written much, much later, after Israel had established its capital in Jerusalem, and not everyone agreed with that. The Samaritans said they were true to Moses. They didn't accept the Jewish capital of Jerusalem. They said, no, it should be here. And they had a Samaritan script, which is older than the one in Jerusalem. And before that, there's Abraham, who again I think is a historical figure, 1750 BC. Oral culture, handing on stories. Jacob, historical figure again, but it's an oral tradition. It's a shamanic thing, because Jacob fights with God. If you read Genesis, he struggles with God to find truth. That's what shamans do. So it's from a religious studies perspective, this Old Testament is fascinating. And if you look at all the prophets, Samuel, Elijah, Elisha, etc., Enoch, who interests me particularly, he is a shadowy figure in the Old Testament, but he has 3 books all to himself later. Now, are they orthodox or not? You see, this is the question. Who defines what is truth within any given religion? Who says, you can read this pile of books, but you can't read that lot. If you read that lot, you're outside of the synagogue, you can't come back. And so, like all religions, there's always this fight between who's in and who's out. The officialdom, who control the production of the texts, the script, the library, they define what is orthodox. Whereas the other lot, they're heretics. Now, but where's the truth? That's what interests me as a philosopher. Is Plato orthodox? Was Socrates? Socrates was called a heretic, so he was thrown out of Athens and killed. Plato became the new orthodoxy. because he stayed and he survived and he taught and he wrote and he gave us these dialogues. Now, many Jews later became Platonists, and they're actually Orthodox. So the true Orthodox tradition, in its best sense, is open to wisdom from whatever source. And if you read the Talmud properly and you read these supplementary writings, like in the Babylon, there were two Talmuds. There's the Palestinian and the Babylonian. They're both slightly different. In the Babylonian Talmud, there's a whole section on peace, and it's awesome. And I've been reading, every day little quotes from it. And one of them is, "There's no peace without justice and truth." Well, I mean, that seems to me just like common sense, but there it is in the Talmud. And if only the people who call themselves Jews, the Netanyahuists, read their Talmud and actually listened to their rabbis, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. They're slaughtering Palestinians because they're Christians and Muslims and have a different path to God. No, truly Orthodox people respect the other.
No, they're just defending themselves.
Well, that's the propaganda, but that's just not true, is it?
No.
I mean, so anyway, it's a huge subject and it's fascinating. And I've just a footnote on the word Orthodox. It's a Greek term, which is first used by Aristotle, Plato's pupil, and it means going straight to the truth. So being Orthodox means that one doesn't fool around with going down all kinds of red herrings and tangents, although they're interesting and one loves them. One always keeps gravitational pull towards truth. So you ask of all these divergent things, where, how is that taking me closer to a world of peace and justice and truth? That's what an Orthodox thinker does, whatever they are, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Anyway, there we are. I hope that satisfies some of your questions. And also, I've been in New York to the great training college where they train rabbis in New York, and I spent many happy days there too. They have a tremendous collection of books, and the thing about Orthodox Judaism is you do have to study. And when I taught religious studies in schools in Britain for 10 years, my kids would say, here's the rabbi coming. It simply means a teacher, so.
Where are the ultra-Orthodox in this?
They're on the picket fences right now,
Yeah.
holding up signs saying,
Yeah.
we do not believe in genocide against the Palestinian people. It has no sanction from God. If you really read the Bible and you really read the Talmud and you really read the oral traditions, the Kabbalah, you cannot commit war crimes. You cannot do genocide. That whole way of thinking, which is Likud's thinking, is an import into the Holy Land by militarized, nationalistic, European settler Jewish people who had no connection with the land and therefore no respect for the indigenous people who've been living there for centuries and who are the descendants of the original inhabitants there. So, yeah, they're on the front lines resisting Netanyahu's nonsense.
But because they're also not accepted to be enlisted in the army. They are peace activists, so they are.
Well, they don't like wars. I mean, war's a terrible thing, and the Jewish people, if anyone, know this. They suffered pogroms throughout history and in the Holocaust. To be a Jew, I was brought up with lots of Jewish friends when I was a kid in my family and background, and they were all peace people. And to me, those are the kind of. I had three Jewish people come round the museum the other day on a tour. The boy is out on the front lines in Jerusalem now, protesting against the nonsense. A thing called Standing Together, which is sort of street protests. I think it's time to bring down the whole Netanyahuist nonsense, but my tools are through the intellectual analysis of it.
The sad part of the whole thing is that he's got the very, very right-wing people into such strong positions in the government as well.
Well, that government's going to fall. I mean, it's a matter of time. It will come down. Okay, let's move on, shall we, to the next one, which was the...
Transpersonal.
Yes.
126B, did you say?
Okay, number 126, right. So this is part of the esoteric groupings, which include things like Freemasonry and Theosophy. And obviously, if you come to my philosophy clubs, you'll realise this is what really excites me as a thinker. I'm an expert in esoteric philosophy and history. Wouter Hanegraaff, one of my colleagues, teaches at the University of Amsterdam. He's one of Europe's leading thinkers on esoteric thought. He did a PhD on the history of the New Age movement, which is a kind of esoteric transpersonal tradition. The phrase transpersonal was coined by Carl Jung, überpersönlich in German, meaning hyper-personal, beyond the personal ego level of consciousness. There's a place where we can reach objective spirit, which is what Hegel talked about as well. And so since Jung's ideas took off, so other thinkers have come, like Abraham Maslow in America, who critiqued conventional psychology. He said, it's just experimenting with rats and seeing how they get out of a cage, and if you give them different kinds of drugs, does it improve their time? And, it's following the ideas of Wundt, a German psychologist, but it's studying things from outside. It was then rebranded as what's called behaviourism. You want to study the behaviour of people, whereas transpersonal thought wants to study from the inside, from consciousness itself, our lived experience of being human, our emotionality, our intellectuality, and our thought lives and our spiritual lives. So transpersonal thought, when I did a course in transpersonal psychology in London in the early 80s with Hazel Guest, who was a pioneer of it, I thought, God, finally somebody's talking about spiritual experience scientifically, and looking at religious experiences as if they actually happen, things like past life, incarnation, research, all these things are part of transpersonal psychology. And Stanislav Grof also pioneered this, and of course, because it coincided with the psychedelic revolution in the 60s, people were experimenting with LSD and finding extraordinary experiences, transpersonal experiences, which turn out to have been classical from ancient Greece. That's what they were doing in ancient Greece. Plato did his LSD experience in Eleusis. They got to drink a kykeon, and you only did it twice. You didn't keep doing it like a party drug, but it revealed the soul. That's what psychedelics do, and I think that's what was important about the 60s revolution. And a lot of people who explored that, Stan Grof and others, it gave birth to this whole movement of transpersonal thought. Roberto Assagioli in Italy was another founder of this tradition. He was the first psychoanalytical student of Freud, but he split from Freud because he remained publicly a materialist. He said, no, all these things can be explained by the chemistry of the brain. They're just illusions you're having. They're not real. Whereas the transpersonal thinkers say, Freud, that's probably not true. You ought to cut down on the cocaine. Modern Jungian thinkers like James Hillman have taken that idea much further. And, I give a list of them all here. Ken Wilber is one of the doyens of transpersonal thought. I think he's published in French. And there's a whole list of thinkers. Now, I'm the guy that then said, why don't we apply this to historical studies? So I invented this concept of transpersonal history, which nobody really had thought of before. And it's taking a while for humanity to catch up because, transpersonal history requires us to be sensitive to each other's soul lives. So, you know, an Orthodox Jew wouldn't bomb people in Palestine because they're conscious that these are incarnate beings with soul lives, and you would talk to them about their great Sufi saints or their great Christian saints in Gaza, and you would share your great Jewish saints, and you'd be interested in the whole spiritual history of the Holy Land as a peace project. And so there are voices beginning to say this. The ultimate for transpersonal thought has many names: the gods, the goddesses, the ultimate reality, the Buddha nature. Alan Watts is a transpersonal thinker. You know, Osho was moving in this direction. And we need to sort of move further along the path to get these ideas out, so that instead of literalists fighting each other, the trouble with the American fundamentalist biblical literalists and the Christian Zionist movement, who want a return of Jesus, they think by bringing Jews back to the Holy Land that's going to clinch it, but they forgot about the Muslims. What do we do about the Palestinians then?
They're waiting for Muhammad, aren't they?
Well, precisely. So if you look at it from a truly transpersonal perspective, 19th century Christian Zionism doesn't work. It missed out some fundamental things it didn't think about. And, you know, I've been listening to this amazing book, Palestine, a 4,000-year-old history, which has a critique of 19th century, largely British Christian Zionism. And it caught on in America. And that's what's behind this whole, you know, let's support Israel, send them all the weapons. They think that's going to bring back the Messiah, i.e. Jesus. Well, no, it doesn't. This is where logical peace comes in. From a logical perspective, that's in an illogical position. And if you seriously want to help hasten a sort of collective enlightenment for the planet, weapons is not the way to go.
He shouldn't be a part of it at all. No.
Sorry?
He shouldn't be a part of it at all.
Well, no, it shouldn't. No, it's about using the tools of knowledge, of intellect, for enlightenment collectively. So anyway, that's the transpersonal. I mean, it's a fascinating field. You can read about it in the text. I deem there's probably about 7 million currently people searching all this stuff. And maybe about 14 million in the whole of history. Yes. And Teilhard de Chardin was one of those, a French Jesuit, talking about the omega point, a highly transpersonal thinker. So, bring it on. Yeah. Okay. Any questions about that? Comments? Let's move on to do our tarot then, because that's always very exciting. See what the gods want to say to our little philosophy club, and yeah, I'll hold them out for you. There we are, and if you want to hold them out for our Mal, that'd be jolly good. Okay, and I'm going to do a goddess in honour of Sophia. She introduced these goddess cards. So we'll have one of those too. Right, what have you got, sir?
Targus, Targus.
Ah, the Etruscan god. Targes.
Targus.
Yeah. He's the, what is he? He's Earth, isn't he? Is it the 9 of Earth or something?
3.
The 3 of Earth, okay. Ah, right. Yes. So, sorry. No, he's not Earth. Rewrite. He's 3 of Air. And, Yes, so he's in volume 2. Now, ever since discovering Italy and going there many times and falling in love with Tuscany, I've always been interested in the Etruscan religion. And this god, Targes, is the most important Etruscan god, and that's why he has his card. And when I went to the Vatican Museum, they have a whole section for Etruscan archaeological finds. Absolutely fascinating. They were a pleasure-loving people, but they also had a discipline about them. And so what's called the Etruscan disciplina was all that we know about Etruscan spirituality. And in ancient Rome, they absolutely were fascinated by all this. What's interesting about Targes is that he appeared out of the earth. That's why I was thinking he was an earth card. But he spoke about the entire cosmos. And he's a prophet and a deity. And he taught the Etruscan people. Now, what's interesting is that their alphabet is the origin of the Latin alphabet, and therefore the origin of all the other West European alphabets, including French and English and so on. It all goes back to Targes, who taught them how to use the alphabet. This is the tradition, right? And they founded these cities, which were highly sophisticated urban cultural centres with writing before Rome became a thing. And these Etruscans were trading with Gaul through a port near Montpellier, which archaeologists have just discovered. And there's a museum down there. And we find Etruscan goods in graves of ancient Celtic chieftains and druids all over France. So the Gauls were in touch with Etruscans and were importing wine and their wisdom. And what's interesting is this Etruscan wisdom is very similar to the Druid wisdom. The priests of Targes were clairvoyant seers who could foretell the future from events in nature, like lightning strikes, bird flight, synchronistic events that happen. They could read those, and they learned how to do that in the Etruscan priesthood. And they taught the Roman priests how to do the same stuff. So Roman religion actually is Etruscan religion. The Romans were fairly barbaric warrior types, but they were civilized by the Etruscans. And religio, which is the word they used for it, is what binds people together, what brings harmony into a community. And I think, therefore, Targes is an important deity, and he's an air god because although he emerged from the clod of the earth, he's interested in the events of the sky. And that was what's called a templum, to study the events of a patch of sky, like cloud shapes and all kinds of phenomena. You could then interpret the weird, to use the Anglo-Saxon word. He was a master navigator of eternity. But he also loved the specific forms of being arising from fertility. So anyway, have a look. It's quite interesting. Why is he coming today? Well, I think Targes is just saying we want peace in Europe. We want to be able to plough the soil in every part of Europe, including Russia and Ukraine, to grow nice crops that aren't destroyed by bombs and poisons. And we want to enjoy life. I mean, the Etruscan idea of heaven is a nice place where you can have parties with your girlfriends and your wife. And